Our father lived through the war and survived. Came back to the living, came back to find life. He stepped off the train to bring these words. I am the strength, I am the love, I am the peace.
We're here today doing The Alliance. And The Alliance is a show about social issues, specifically about child apprehension and the abuse of power from social workers, which seems to be destroying the family unit and the children. The social workers are aware of the alienation issues and the abandonment issues and the development issues that happen later on after the apprehension, but for some reason seem to ignore all of these things when it's proven later on in life that it's destruction. We're here with Kari Simpson. Nice to have you on the show, Kari.
Well, thanks for having me, Terrance.
Maybe I can get you to tell the people a little bit about who you are, what you've done, a little bit.
Well, we'll restrict it mostly to the issues involving apprehension, child protection issues, and the family.
Yes.
Because as you said in your intro, this is an important issue. This affects our families. This affects the development of children. This affects our healthy society. So important topic. People need to be aware.
One other thing that I wanted to make a point on is that our children are probably the most important commodity that our government has because it's our future.
Well, and the sad part about that is your definition and my definition as an important commodity probably translates into a very different thing for the government, because a lot of what we will talk about is the job creation that results from the destruction of the family.
Exactly.
They're the commodity to us because they're our heritage, they're our legacy. We as parents, want to honor and be proud of what we raise and healthy contributing members of society. And yet there's so much in our society that government is responsible for that is creating obstacles to that achievement. Mm-hmm. And instead the commodity, scary, is that it is contributing to the workforce. This is $1 billion industry to have children taken away from their families.
$1.4 billion last year
in this
province.
Yeah, this is a multi-billion dollar industry across Canada. A little bit about the background and how I became involved in this issue. I head up an organization called Culture Guard. That has morphed out of another organization called the Citizens Research Institute. Culture Guard covers a variety of topics, everything from our rights to eat what we want to, with health and food and agriculture.
In other words, GMOs?
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do a show on that. To smart meters and those effects and the right of citizens to have a say in those areas, to issues involving the family. And increasingly, our resources from Culture Guard have always been given in the most to issues where the state is intruding into the lives of its citizenry. And one of the best examples is what we're going to be talking about today, the right to come in, take your children without warrant, without reason, without investigation.
Without proof.
Without proof, and put them in a system that you now have to fight for to get your babies back.
Yes, yeah. This is something that I really don't understand. We have an organization that is a corporation taking our children. So in order for the corporation to keep succeeding and be successful, the commodity that makes it successful is our children.
Well, and let's just take a moment to look at the spin-offs from this industry, okay?
Yes.
Who has jobs as a result of your children or my children being in the system, or anybody's children? Because at any given time, there's over 10,000 kids involved in this, in this province, people. I mean, multiply this as you go across Canada. But let's say social workers have jobs. Foster parents now have jobs, and that's a lucrative little business to be involved
extremely.
in. Who else has jobs? Well, the police get a little extra work because they have to attend with social workers. Psychologists get a lot of work.
Yes.
Lawyers even more work, but also judges. All these people have a vested financial interest in children being in this system, and that's so totally wrong right there.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's probably what contributes to the problem continuing on.
Exactly. I was advocating for someone in court, and he's an older man, and he turned to me and he said, "Look around." every single person in here is making money off of the backs of my children, and I'm losing $300 today.
Sheriffs, court clerks, I mean, the list continues on. You know, we just hit the prominent players, right? But there's a whole supporting cast and crew to that as well.
Exactly.
So we got into the issues involving apprehension quite by accident, Terrance. We were investigating several years ago sex abuse prevention programs, and the reason why we were investigating what those were, because it sounds so nice. Who wouldn't want their child to be equipped in the schools to prevent some pervert from attacking them?
Yes.
Unfortunately, when we started looking into the program, and the reason why I looked into the program is a very good friend of mine suddenly found herself with the threat of her children being apprehended after her daughter participated in this program. And what we discovered in this program was horrific. Over and over and over again, little children were told, these are 5 and 6-year-olds, that their fathers and grandfathers were the most likely people to commit this crime against them.
Wow.
And the people who were going to save them was the teacher. Well, of course, you talked earlier at the intro here about the destruction of family.
Yes.
What are we doing indoctrinating little 5-year-olds with the fact that the people that they love and depend on in the overwhelming majority of cases are the people who at some point are going to harm them? Anyway, it was once people started to parse apart the program, they could see what was really going on here. And it was a well-intentioned program, at least from the teacher's point of view. And that was what's so difficult about some of these issues, including this issue we're talking about, because people say, well, don't you want to save the children? Absolutely, I want to save the children. I want to reduce the disaster that is taking place in epidemic proportion in this province with the destruction of children and the abuse of children, and the chief abuser in this province of children is the government.
Exactly. It's really distasteful going over all of these things. It's almost as if we're living in a secret society where we're in the Matrix, and we really don't know what's going on because we're asleep.
Well, we do, Terrance, because any parent whose little Johnny happens to break his arm at 5 or 6 years of age is going to think twice before sending little Johnny to school, right? And
or even to the hospital.
And most men, if you saw a lost child in the mall, would you go help that child?
No.
No,
and have to think twice.
This is a sad commentary on where we've come to these issues. So everybody knows something's really wrong. Everybody knows something's terribly wrong. I think social workers are the most despised individuals, and everybody says that, right? And that's too bad for the good ones, because there are many good social workers, but they don't last very long in the system, because those good social workers will not stand for children being abused, and this system abuses children.
You know, and that's really funny that you should bring that up, because that abuse is prevalent in something that you did, I believe it was back in 1991, right? And you went before the, which committee was it again, sorry?
Well,
or
actually,
you went before the ombudsman, right?
No, well, we ended up going before the ombudsman, but ironically, a lot of what happened back in 1991, which was very good for parents and a very good turn for government, we took public the amount of apprehensions. Of course, I went public with the issues around these silly sex abuse prevention programs. Well, next thing I know, my phone is ringing off the hook with parents saying, Kari, can you help me? Kari, can you help me? So my next little investigative project was into child protection laws. And I was horrified to see that there was no accountability factor for government. So we started looking into these cases, and I took them public. Week after week after week, we took family after family on air. CKNW partnered up with us at that point. And soon there was quite hubbubaloo going on about this. And the minister of the day, that was a social credit government way back then, I'm dating myself a lot now.
You don't look a day past 29.
Thank you. Actually, I got carded in the States this week. I said this is good news, right? Twice in the last little while. But you have to card everybody who looks under 40 apparently, so it's only half good, right? So Minister Norm Jacobson, at that point in time, went public and challenged me to a public inquiry.
Okay.
I said, bring it on.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And, of course, Stephen Owen was ombudsman in BC in 1991. And we had worked closely with the Ombudsman's office, so I knew that they were aware, at least in part, that there were some real problems. And he came down with public report number 24, which looks like this.
All right.
And
just hold it up for the camera.
And, said some very good things. He came down foursquare with what we had said. There's enormous problems. Children are being abused. He said there's way too many apprehensions. And he addressed a lot of the issues that were going on. He said most children don't need to be apprehended from their homes. Families need support systems instead. He went on to talk about the accountability issues, that there weren't any. He talked about the children that are in the system, because this is a whole nother problem. The kids who do need to be apprehended, who do need to be placed in the foster system, are being destroyed as well. There's not much good coming out of this system that's costing us billions and billions of dollars.
Exactly.
So we saw some really good changes with the ministry, and at that point in time under the social credit government, I was requested to go over often to Victoria to assist in the development of what should be done in new laws. Regrettably, we had a change of government, and we saw new laws be brought in that, again, just have continued with the problems.
Now, what are some of the recommendations that has any of them been applied?
Well, they pay lip service a lot to the issues, but I think where we see things that need to be done warrants. Now, the act that's governing us right now definitely says that if access to a child is denied, that the social workers is incumbent upon them to go get a warrant. And one of the things I tell people when they tell me, that they're going to be investigated or social workers are calling, I say, well, hide your kids. Take them away. And if somebody gives you heck over, you say, Kari Simpson told me to do this. You point to the section within the act and says, no, I'm denying you access. You have to go to court. Because at least then the social workers have to put forward the complaint.
The reason.
You know exactly what you're dealing with.
Yes.
Because as so many people will provide testimony to, you never know what the issue is.
And the issue, once the children are apprehended, the issue just tends to grow with your unsatisfiedness with the social worker and not being able to find out what the reason is. Another important provision that should be in the act is the right to know who your accuser is. Yes.
Criminals have more rights than families do.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Parents, if somebody's narking on you, you should have a right to know if it's your noisy neighbor next door who you've complained to the bylaw officer trying to get back at you. You should have a right to know if it's a disgruntled ex. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. You should have the right to face your accuser, as criminals have the right to know who's accusing them. Regrettably, that's not a requirement here.
Exactly.
And so, the other thing is judges should be held accountable. That's one of the big problems that we see continuously. Judges who ignore the Charter of Rights, who ignore what the best interest of children is, who just hide under the skirts of the judiciary and put the onus back on social workers or believe everything a social worker says. That's another big problem. Also, the definition of when a child is in need of protection, Terrance. If I am likely to physically harm my child, if I am likely to emotionally harm my child, as a parent, it's my duty to emotionally harm my 14-year-old who wants to go out and dress like a hooker.
Exactly.
It's and I might physically restrain her under those circumstances. Well, okay, then I've breached both of those provisions. Under the law, I should be investigated.
Well, it's really funny because the word likely is almost like we're having thought crimes.
Well, absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to predict that you're going to do this. Well, and, we see that a lot. We see that a lot with homeschool families. We see that a lot with families out of faith-based religious homes, right? If you're a Christian, well, chances are you're going to spank those kids. And there's a lot of social workers who don't think we should be spanking kids.
Exactly, or don't believe in religion, period.
Absolutely. And so you're emotionally harming those children by doing those kinds of things. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of simple solutions, but of course those solutions would result in a reduction of services being created. Job creation would just not be an opportunity there. The unions would lose members.
Exactly.
And that is the real problem.
It's big business.
It's big business takes the interest over children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now what has actually transpired in this report. Have you received any feedback on anything in here?
Well, it was kind of interesting because we saw a lot of lip service being paid. We saw the
Yes.
new Family and Child Service Act come down when the NDP got in. And they made one interesting provision. They developed an organization within the Act that was a statute regulated called the Family and Child Review Board.
Okay.
And I was appointed to that board.
I didn't know you were appointed that
Yes.
board. I was actually just doing some research on it because I was actually looking at reactivating it because I was looking at the one in Toronto or in Ontario.
Yes, and
Sorry.
they kind of took the model over. And it was an independent board. Well, of course, we acted independently, and the NDP got very upset with us. As a matter of fact, at one point, one of the MLAs made some very disparaging comments about the review board that was acting independently and doing what we were supposed to do, and he had to apologize. So I was sitting at lunch at Earl's. I remember it clearly. My phone rang. Kari, hit a TV. So I ran into the lounge. I made them change the channel, and we watched the minister apologize to me and my other members. But the problem with that board, it was really a good board. It allowed us quasi-judicial powers. We could summons people. They could give evidence. It was done in a very non-threatening environment, so parents didn't need a lawyer. It was really good. If they weren't that articulate, one of us board members could certainly, well, we could elicit the right information, right?
Yes,
you know,
yes.
the only problem is that the Act didn't give us the ability to direct remedy. So we could come down with our findings, we could come down with our decision, but then the social workers could just give us the bird and say, well, too bad, right? So there was no way we could say, this is what you're going to do. Our decisions were, you've acted improperly, or you've acted properly, whatever the case. On those matters where they acted improperly, we were not given the authority to direct the remedy, which is one of the big problems.
Yeah, because, I mean, you can suggest, but if you can't affect change, I mean, you're just a storefront.
Well, if you can't hold the social workers accountable, right?
Exactly.
And the government of the day could have allowed all those decisions from those hearings to be under the court's auspices. In other words, if there was the need for judicial review, you know, let the social workers then proceed, right?
Exactly.
The other really important issue I think that has to change in this, Terrance, is that families should have the right to have their legal counsel paid for.
Yes, yes.
The state can't come in and you know, take your children and then expect you to pay tens upon thousands of dollars for a lawyer who's part of the system, you know, while you try to get your kids back. And ironically, you know, I've always wondered about this because the state's also charging tax for those services.
Exactly.
So not only are you creating jobs, but you're paying tax. It's a little point, but it's one that I find a bit ironic. Yeah. So, you know, whatever way you look at this is problematic, right? And whatever way you look at it is the kids are harmed.
The kids are suffering. I mean, one of the biggest problems, Kari, that I find with this entire system is that it takes so long to even get heard. I mean, the MCFD here in British Columbia, which is Ministry of Child and Family, Development, says that you get into court right away. But what a lot of people don't know is when you get into court, it's just to say yes or no that you agree to them removing your child. So that's not court. That's not fight. You can't do anything. No. So it's a farce. And then so now your kids are gone for 6 months while the social workers drum up whatever they can because at this point you're emotional and you have no clue what's going on.
Well, and then they start calling everybody that that need to bolster their position on it, right? So your best friend from 4 years ago who took money from you didn't pay back, they're going to call him and say, you know, what's up with
what's
Terrance?
this person's character? So, you know, I think what we should really need to do is accountability. And I think at this point, we need to get involved with some parents
Well,
that are...
I think this has to become election issue material, Terrance, right? Everybody has a vested interest in this. Tax dollars are going for this. Yeah. So, Terrance, I look at these issues, and that this is, historically, I mean, since the 80s, these problems continue. Politicians know there's problems. People know there's problems. The time to change all this is now. We can't afford government in its current capacity. Here's the perfect place for us to say, wait a minute, what are we really accomplishing here? Are we helping children, or are we destroying children? That's a simple answer.
Are we destroying our future, Kari?
Well, absolutely.
To the people listening, it's our future.
Yes, because everybody has a stake in this. Even if you don't have kids, you still have a stake in this.
Exactly.
So we have a provincial election, we know, coming up in 2013. Everybody, every political party, and it's interesting, politically now I think we don't see such a divide between right and left anymore. I think people are coming together and understanding that government should have a confined role in our lives, because it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Expanding.
There was a Chief Justice, Laforêt, of the Supreme Court of Canada. He said, the state is ill-equipped to deal with children. Duh.
Yeah, exactly.
We know this, so let's do something about it. So we have a provincial election, and one of the things I know, I host a show called Roadkill Radio on roadkillradio.com, and one of the things we continuously talk about, Terrance, is the need for people to take back their democracy, to make their politicians accountable, and here's the perfect opportunity to do that, and you will be benefiting every child in this province by becoming democratically inclined. So we have what's called the V3, okay? People have the power through their voice to talk about these issues, get enlightened about these issues, become informed, say, this is wrong if parents are likely to physically harm, that they can scoop kids. This is wrong that we're paying billions of dollars to destroy children, okay? Your voice, important, your vote. Every person who wants to represent you in as a government elected official, you need to go and find out where they stand on these issues. We're talking about separation of state and family, and you and I can do show after show after show about how the state is intruding into our lives, whether it's the Infants Act, where they now allow little 12-year-olds to go get abortions without parental knowledge. Kids are being injected with vaccines that are dangerous in the schools, and parents aren't being notified. People should be outraged over this. Another billion-dollar industry, by the way, when you start looking at the pharmaceutical implications to those things.
We all know about the pharmaceuticals.
There's so much. But the most important point here is, at what point do we just say enough? So the third V is your value, and you have a value on where you spend your money, what corporations are facilitating the government to continuously harm our kids and our families. So we need to become informed on these things, Terrance. We need to start demanding that there be warrants in every case of child apprehension. I mean, sure, you're going to have your emergency situation. I'm okay with that. If there's a gunfight going down in the house, go scoop the kids. But if mom's just drunk again, and you've known about this family, and this is what Stephen Owen makes very clear in here, is most of the families that these kids were apprehended, that we studied, the state was well aware that there were problems. They didn't need to apprehend them, right? So start understanding the role of government accountability. Judges accountable, social workers accountable. We must do that.
Yes, definitely. I fully am aware of what you're saying, and I think that it needs to be more publicized to the people. And the accountability factor is something that I plan to actually work on extremely. Well, your show is so important, Terrance, because many of the mainstream media, the large corporate, they won't touch it. And that's a problem, for fear that they might get one story wrong. Well, I look at the Matthew Vaudreuil case, which there was a giant report on. And, they said, oh, well, we need more power. We had more power. If we had more power, he'd be alive. No, they had more power than God to apprehend that child. It was bad decision-making. All right. We'll be back next week with Kari Simpson on The Alliance